As many of you probably already know, Joe Rogan recently signed a deal with Spotify to exclusively stream his podcast on their platform.
I have an announcement. The podcast is moving to Spotify. I signed a multi-year licensing agreement with Spotify that will start on September 1st.
We knew it was coming, and then it shocked the world when it did happen.
Now, it's speculated that he made over $100 million from that deal, but we believe that he made more.
I think that Joe Rogan up front probably got 125 to 150 million.
I've heard the number as high as 500 million.
I mean, Brian, know the real number.
How much he actually made is super significant, not just for Joe, but for the future of all podcasters and content creators. What he did was single-handedly set the precedent for how much a content creator can be valued. It's like real estate. When a property in your area goes up, so does your property.
So in this video, we're gonna figure out how much Joe actually makes in a year, how much he realistically made from the Spotify deal, and how much money he's gonna save moving to Texas. Let's get into it.
Joe Rogan is the shining example of the modern entrepreneur. He's carved his own financial path both creatively and massively. From acting to comedy to MMA commentating, the Renaissance man invested in podcasting way before anyone else thought it was worthwhile. He's known for saying whatever he wants, however he wants, and leans both left and right of center. He even takes drugs while on his show. He's amassed a following of listeners and watchers that bring in over 190 million downloads a month.
With a knack for interviewing, with a natural curiosity to understand the vast array of intellectual topics that make us human, after 11 years, Joe Rogan's catalog of over 1,500 podcasts have been discussions with a prolific group of guests ranging from neuroscientists, fighters and comedians, to celebrities and politicians, which up to now has all been available on YouTube.
Joe produces his podcast here in the Valley of Los Angeles, just miles away from us. For years, he's entertained the idea of actually leaving California.
I'm going to move out of California.
When you're older?
No, not that much time. I think pretty soon.
No.
Yeah.
So why would anybody want to leave the city of dreams, the land of sunshine? Especially for someone like Joe, a marijuana enthusiast. Well, here are Joe's reasons why.
I don't know if this is a good place to live. First of all, it's extremely expensive. The taxes here are ridiculous. There's a lot of people here, Joey Diaz. That there's something that's taxing about the volume of people here. For sure, we're going to have a disaster. And when we have a disaster, then we're going to realize the real consequences of jamming 20 million people into a small area. When you look at the number of people that are catching COVID because of this overpopulation issue, the traffic, when you look at the economic despair, when you look at the homelessness problem that's accelerated.
Fucking
The homeless?
13%
Dude,
taxes.
some homeless took a
And the
shit by
homeless-
my coffee shop.
You ever
there.
see
a
Nancy?
shit? A human shit.
And Joe isn't the only one.
Although there are 500,000 people coming to California every year, last year alone, there were 691,000 people that left California. In fact, for the last 9 years, there's been a negative migration.
Popular states Californians are heading to include Washington and Colorado, but by far the #1 most popular state is Texas.
Hey, I might move to Texas. Callan and I and Shab have actually talked about this. Like,
I've been here for 25 years in Los Angeles.
LA?
If you said, Brian, pack a bag, you got to go to a lake in Austin, I wouldn't fucking look back. Let's let Rogan be the canary in the coal mine.
So why Texas?
Texas is buck wild, bro. There's more tigers in Texas than the whole rest of the planet. You know, you're a cool combination of like hip and progressive and tolerant.
Oh, you want a tiger?
And also you have guns.
You want a tiger?
Texas is a different animal, son. But it's one of the safest places to be. I like people in Texas. They're friendly. They're cordial. They hold doors for you. They say, good morning. They're what I would want America to be like.
So why now?
Part of the fleet are 30-somethings that moved here for a job and realized they don't want to raise a family here.
Another part is politics. Now that California is skewed far left, a lot of retirees that grew up in Republican California are over it. And they don't like our governor.
For many, how the pandemic has been handled has seemed to be the last straw.
Here's the crazy thing. Garcetti said, we're going to keep LA on at least partial lockdown until there's a cure.
Okay.
There's not going to be a cure, you fucking dummy. Did you see that the LA is there? They have a number now where you can turn in businesses that aren't complying. Like what is going on? This is bad government.
It seemed like the only thing that may have kept Joe in LA was the Comedy Store.
Yeah, but are you going to be satisfied not doing sets every night at the store, man?
California continues to be this restrictive.
Yeah.
And if they really say that we can't do stand-up until 2022 or some shit like that,
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. This is silly. I don't need to be here. If they won't let us do the store, but we could do stand-up other places, why would we stay here?
So the case to move has been made, and in comes the Spotify deal, puts the nail right in the coffin.
So the question is, how much was Joe making before the deal? And how much is he making now that the deal has been made?
According to some of the numbers, he's already making $30 million a year. Some say he's making 50 grand an episode he does.
Last year, Forbes said he made $30 million.
The podcast made $30 million. Yeah.
The podcast, not him.
If he was making $30 million a year on a podcast and it's a 3-year deal, it doesn't make sense for him to do it for only 120. I feel like it's got to be double what he would have made in those 3 years. At least 180.
But we could be completely wrong.
Totally.
But
What's funny to me is watch people speculate how much you got paid. I mean, Brian, know the real number. Yeah. So far off.
He's going to be fine. Money's not an issue.
We feel that it's safe to value Joe at higher than Wall Street Journal's $100 million. We're gonna value Joe at $160 million. That would put him at about an average of $40 million a year salary on a 4-year deal.
Which, by the way, is just from his podcast, which he still owns the rights to. He just gave the licensing to Spotify. He still owns his podcast. On top of that, there's a good chance his JRE Clips channel, his second channel, is gonna remain on YouTube. So that's an additional revenue source.
Now, if you feel that Spotify took a big risk at paying out $160 million to Joe, just know that within 2 days of Joe's announcement, the valuation for Spotify jumped to $35.29 billion.
Look at that spike in their stock on the announcement that they had signed Joe Rogan.
That's $4.76 billion it made in just 2 days.
Whoa.
Made Spotify $5 billion in 48 hours. Joe Rogan is worth essentially $5 billion.
Now, a big part of that is that it also released the video streaming, so it's all kind of rolled in there. So it's a win-win for everyone, for Joe, for Spotify, for content creators.
So how much is Joe actually saving, or making, depending on how you look at it, in moving to Texas? Let's break it down.
For the sake of this breakdown, we're gonna cancel out the opportunity cost of living in each state, since we've kind of gone over that already. We're also gonna cancel out business expenses, since they're probably the same in both states.
That said, let's start with the big one, income tax. In California, if you make more than $1 million a year, you have to pay 13.3% in state income tax alone. That's not even taking into account federal income tax. Assuming Joe makes $160 million from the deal, that means he would have to pay $21.28 million just for living in Los Angeles. That's a lot of money. But that doesn't matter. Joe just announced that he's moving to Texas. So how much is he gonna save by moving? Well, he's gonna save $21.28 million. That's because Texas has a 0% income tax. So if Joe makes $160 million from the Spotify deal, that means he gets to keep $160 million. So essentially Texas is saying, here Joe, take $21 million for moving here. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Now, let's talk federal income tax. This one's a little bit easier to calculate since it doesn't really matter where you are in the US. If you're in that $622K a year and above bracket, you're gonna have to pay 37%. That means on a $160 mil deal, Joe would have to give up $59.2 mil. Now, knowing Joe, he probably would write a lot of that off business expense, but come on.
So now let's talk about actual real estate. The average price of a house in Los Angeles is about $700,000, and that's fairly conservative taking into account that there's $100 million houses in the hills. Now conversely in Texas, the average price of a house is about $300,000, but we both know that Joe isn't your average guy. Joe's current house here in LA is worth about $5 million. Now it's about 9,000 square feet. He's got 6 bedrooms, 9 baths, and it's on a 1.27 acre lot. Which, by the way, it's kind of shocking how easy it is to find this information. Like, you would think it wouldn't be this readily available. It's kind of scary. Although Joe hasn't technically announced exactly where in Texas he's moving to.
Where in Texas, though?
I don't know, man. I like Dallas a lot. Austin, I like Houston. I like everywhere I go in Texas. Austin, I like Austin a lot. I like Dallas a lot. I don't know if I'd live in Houston.
So small town Texas, or?
Let's just leave it at that.
We're putting him in Austin. So we had to ask ourselves, what kind of house would Joe Rogan buy? Well, I doubt he'd downgrade from his 9,000 square foot house, so let's start there. He's probably also gonna want a decent amount of land considering he's the outdoors type. And finally, I noticed this river that runs through Austin, so let's put him near that. He's got an extra 21 mil, why not?
After doing some extensive research, I think we found Joe the perfect Austin home. For $6.95 million, just about $2 million more than his current home, he'll have 7 bedrooms and 9 baths. That's 11,745 square feet on 4.65 acres of land. A private theater, a gym, a mini golf course, a separate detached apartment, his own studio for his podcast, and a boat dock right off the lake in his backyard. Not bad. Now, if Joe decided to stay in LA, assuming that he cashed his check and upgraded to a new home in Los Angeles of the same specs of this hypothetical Texas house, I want you guys to pause this video right now, comment down below what you think that house would go for. All right, you ready? A house with roughly the same specs would cost Joe $25.5 million here in Los Angeles.
And finally, just when you thought we were done, property tax. Now, I will say, California actually takes the crown for this one. In California, the average property tax is 0.79%. Compare that to Texas's, which is 1.86%. That's more than double. However, in Texas, you can get something called a homestead exemption, which essentially removes a slice of your home's valuation and deducts that from your taxes, usually about $25,000. But in certain counties, like Travis County, where Austin is conveniently located, you can get an additional 20% off your property tax. So Joe would essentially only be paying 1.86% on a $5.5 million house versus a $6.95 million house. So how much money is Joe actually going to save by moving to Texas? Now, if we assume the Spotify deal was for $160 million, we know he'll get to keep 13.3% of that, which would have normally gone to the state of California. That number comes out to $21,280,000 he's saving right off the bat. Now, considering Texas's higher property tax of 1.86%, Joe would have to give up $129,270 of that money. However, if he applies for the homestead exemption, he'd only have to pay $102,300 towards property taxes. As far as federal taxes go, Joe isn't saving anything. No matter where he goes in the US, he's gonna have to pay 37% of his income, so that number is 0. So that means that by moving to Texas, Joe Rogan is saving himself $21,177,700. By acquiring the Joe Rogan podcast, Spotify instantly turned themselves into a #1 podcasting platform. Many are commending them for the big move and for investing in top-tier talent and bringing a healthy, much-needed competition to YouTube, which will ultimately help creators as a whole.
But on the other hand, a lot of people feel betrayed. Some think that he'll lose a big part of his audience. Others think that he'll actually grow a new, broader audience, that he'll be better equipped to do his show his way. What do you guys think? Let us know down in the comments.
And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe for more videos like this one. See you next week.